Millions of phone and internet records secretly gathered by the National Security Agency. Lawmakers defend the practice.
What they're trying to do is find out what terrorist groups we know about and individuals and who the hell are calling.
Cyber espionage high on the agenda of a meeting between China's President Xi Jinping and President Obama in Southern California. A big week for healthcare in California, from a protest against cuts to Medi-Cal to President Obama's speech in San Jose on healthcare reform.
If you're one of the nearly 85% of Americans who already have insurance, either through Medicare or Medicaid or your employer, you don't have to do a thing.
Plus, stories of those who fought to preserve some of the Bay Area's most treasured open space in the new documentary, Rebels with a Cause.
We don't see polo fields out here. We don't see the golf course. We don't see subdivisions.
Coming up next.
Good evening, I'm Thuy. Welcome to This Week in Northern California. Joining me tonight on our news panel are Lisa Alaferis, editor for KQED State of Health blog, Joe Mann, Reuters Technology Projects reporter, and Levi Sumagaysay, editor and blogger for SILICONBEAT at the Mercury News. Rapidly unfolding news about sweeping surveillance programs. In addition to turning over customer phone records, internet data is also being collected. The Obama administration and California Senator Dianne Feinstein are defending the practice, while House Speaker John Boehner called on the president to explain.
It's important for the president to outline to the American people why the tools that he has available to him are critical to the threats that we may have.
So, Levi, does the Obama administration have a good defense of these practices, or is it a huge overreach?
Well, privacy advocates are saying that it is a huge overreach. They're not sure. There's a lot of unknowns. We don't know what the administration is doing with the information, and so people are up in arms.
So there's a lot of information. I mean, we're talking about millions and millions of bits of information out there that they're mining. What are they doing with the data that they have? Is there special software that they're looking for terrorist connections?
Well, that's one of the rationales that's being cited by the administration, that we need this kind of surveillance so that for terrorism. For fighting terrorism. So, we don't know exactly how it's being used. This stuff is just beginning to come out. So it'll be interesting to see, what else is disclosed in the next couple days or the next few weeks.
The president is saying that every branch of the government has been informed. Every member of Congress, which even when he said that, I thought, really, every member of Congress? But already some members of Congress are saying,
yeah, they didn't know about it, or they're saying they're upset about it. And also, I think in terms of the special court that the president is citing, that court, according to the ACLU and other groups like the ACLU, operates, in a top secret manner. We don't know they hold hearings in private, so we don't know what they're doing, and that's what people are saying, that this court isn't accountable to anybody, really.
There have been so many revelations that have come up within the past 24, 48 hours, and perhaps even more troubling than the phone records is the PRISM program. Tell me about that, because there are quite a few Silicon Valley links, too.
Well, the Washington Post reported yesterday that the government has direct access to the servers of the big tech companies like Microsoft and Silicon Valley companies like Facebook and Google and Yahoo. So those companies are denying that the government has direct access. But I was just reading, and the New York Times says that while the access may not be direct, this government program supposedly, the government supposedly has equipment within the companies that they can then access to be able to see that data, all that data that Facebook users are sharing, all the data that users of Gmail and photos, text, messages, and stuff like that.
That's very troubling. I mean, for all the people who are using these sites, and there, of course, have been privacy concerns about what Google and Facebook, for example, do with all that data. But there has been some expectation that the government is not spying on that kind of information. In either case, if companies like Google or Facebook did not know the government was doing this, or if it did know and went along with it, it doesn't seem like it looks good for the company in either circumstance. Yeah,
that's right. Well, Google and Facebook, for example, they say that they're protecting our information. That's our expectation, and so if they didn't know that the government was somehow gathering this information, then that looks bad for them because they're not protecting the information.
So there's an important distinction in these two programs that have been disclosed so far, and I get the feeling there may be more disclosures the next week or two. They're coming pretty fast and furious at the moment. But the calling record disclosure with the order telling Verizon to turn over all of its calling records includes domestic calling records. So not the contents of calls, but who called whom and for how long and how often. The thing involving the internet companies, they say that the government says that they're aiming for foreign intelligence. So there's a much lower threshold. If you want to collect information about people not in the U.S., people who are not U.S. people, it's a lot easier. It's easier for them to do. But that doesn't help Facebook and Google when they're trying to expand overseas, because they're being treated, their users over there are being treated differently.
And also, communicate like Gmail communications or Facebook communications between Americans and people abroad. I mean, that's still Americans' information is still being collected. So even though the government says, we're doing this because we want to track foreign terrorist suspects, the communications between Americans and those suspects, it still falls under that umbrella.
And I have to ask this question real quickly before we leave this topic, which is, civil libertarians have been warning about this for years. The Electronic Frontier Foundation in San Francisco filed a suit years ago involving AT&T over similar issues. That suit got dismissed by the U.S. Supreme Court. My question is, with all these new revelations now, does that breathe new life into the currently pending cases on these very types of issues? Yeah,
I think so. And today, on the EFF blog, they wrote that, because these programs have now been acknowledged by the government, they can no longer claim privilege, so
the state secrets
right,
privilege.
The state secrets privilege,
not a secret anymore.
Right. So so actually the EFF is very optimistic because the government has a couple of lawsuits against the government. So they're pretty optimistic that now that things are starting to come out, it'll be better for them.
And I have a feeling much more will come out in the days to come. Levi, thank you so much. Well, President Obama and China's President Xi Jinping are meeting in Southern California. Amid the peaceful backdrop of a desert retreat in Rancho Mirage, they'll be talking about highly contentious issues. The U.S. has accused China of launching cyber attacks in this country and stealing intellectual property. Now, Joe, lay out for us real quickly some of the major cyber attacks we've seen, and also, do you think any real progress will come out of this meeting?
So on the issue of attacks, there are a lot of people in Washington who cringe when we say cyber attack, because mostly when we're talking about China, we're not talking about physical destruction. We're not talking about an attack the way the Pentagon would talk about an attack. We're talking about espionage, which is something that has gone on for thousands and thousands of years. What's different now is really the scale of it. A number of top Washington officials say this is the greatest transfer of wealth in history. China seems to be able to take whatever they want, not just from the U.S. government and defense contractors, which are longtime targets, but also companies like Google, other tech companies, Symantec. There are a lot in Silicon Valley that have been hit repeatedly by Chinese cyber espionage.
And in fact, Google's chairman Eric Schmidt has said that China is the most prolific cyber hacker. How concerned should we be? If they can hack into these systems, doesn't it mean they can also disable the systems as well?
Yeah, it does, and that's a very good point. I personally think that people should be very concerned about the scale of the theft just on its own merits. But when we talk about destructive attacks, which is what people are starting to worry about, yes, absolutely. The hard part is getting in. You can destroy the data as easily as you can steal it. But we haven't seen it because mostly the motives have been, espionage, information, maybe looking for holes to come back later. But we have seen a few destructive attacks. There was Stuxnet, which was the U.S. and Israel against Iran. And then in the past year, there was an attack on Saudi Aramco, the state-owned oil company, where 30,000 PCs were wiped clean. And then in South Korea, where there were media and banking companies whose PCs were blanked by destructive viruses. It's actually quite easy once you get in. And so one of the big fears is that that's coming down the pike.
So. Go ahead.
How much is it? How much is the U.S. Jeopardizing its own position on this topic, given its apparent, though never admitted, participation in Stuxnet?
Well, I mean that's the great Chinese counterargument. We are the ones. The United States are the ones that have so far. We're the first ones to have launched what is fairly described as a cyber weapon, something that actually destroyed something physical. In this case, Iranian nuclear centrifuges. In addition to that, we are, by the former NSA director's admission, the most proficient in the world at spying. We're really good at cyber spying, and we've bugged the Chinese leadership like crazy. So I think the main Chinese defense is, maybe we're in your companies, maybe you're not, but you're all over us. So what's the big difference?
So given that that's the scenario, that China cyber hacks us just as much as we cyber hack them, realistically, how much pressure can President Obama put on President Xi to stop this practice when they're meeting this weekend?
Well, I think this weekend is more of a chance to build rapport, to identify the big issues. I don't expect any major breakthroughs, but it is encouraging for people in Silicon Valley who are concerned about this, and for security experts, that this has finally gotten this high on the agenda. A little less prominent, but also important. There's been an ongoing strategic and economic dialogue with China and the U.S., and they've agreed to have a cyber working group so that officials from both countries who are expert in cyber will talk about what are the norms of behavior, what are the rules of the road, how much espionage is too much espionage, where we'd have to retaliate in some sort of trade fashion.
The Silicon Valley companies, what's their role in all this? They say they've been the victims, but don't they also make the technology that allows for this type of cyber hacking?
Yes. So this is Silicon Valley's got a number of roles. They're major victims. The big companies here are major victims of this kind of espionage. We also have some security companies that are worth a lot of money that are based right here. There's Symantec, McAfee, now part of Intel, and some startups already worth $1 billion privately that are specialists in this sort of thing. But they're also offensive. They're makers of offensive gear. And this is something that the U.S. government basically never talks about. But the U.S. government is maybe the biggest buyer of vulnerabilities in software. There are people in Silicon Valley whose job it is to find flaws in Windows or Chrome or whatever, and then sell it to a defense contractor who sells it to the NSA, which uses it overseas, which unfortunately leaves all of us more vulnerable, because these weapons only work if nobody knows there's a hole, and other people will find the same hole sooner or later.
All right, very interesting. Joe, thank you. Well, California Democrats have repeatedly complained that President Obama comes here only to pick up campaign checks without holding any public events on key issues. It seems their point has been heard. The president touted his health care reforms at an event in San Jose today.
You've just got a wide array of new benefits, better protections, and stronger cost controls that you didn't have before, and that will, over time, improve the quality of the insurance that you've got. Benefits like...
Well, Lisa, you attended today's event. What were the president's main points, and are they enough to quiet critics of the plan?
Well, the president's main points were, I think this was largely a politically motivated event, as you acknowledged. Carla Marinucci earlier this week reported that Democrats were very frustrated.
She's the San Francisco Chronicle's political reporter.
Yes. So the president talked for about 10 minutes about the health care law. He touted California's apparent success so far. The Covered California, the state's insurance marketplace, has released its plans and premiums. The premiums are not as high as people had worried they would be.
How much are they?
So the average statewide plan is $321 a month. The rates have yet to be approved by regulators. They're in the process of that now. But critics say that these rates are still higher than what people are paying now. So there's a lot of people who tend to support the law think that there's good news. People who tend to disagree with the law are convinced that the other shoe is dropping and we're just not aware of it.
Well, in fact, Blue Shield recently suggested that it might raise premiums by 25% in Maryland. And now there's been some talk and concern about, well, are they going to try to do that here too?
Blue Shield announced when Covered California released its plans 2 weeks ago. Blue Shield said they expected their current individual policyholders to see an increase in rates of about 13%. But remember that health insurance does rise because healthcare costs are rising. But what the president was talking about today was the number of Californians there are 6 million uninsured Californians. About 2.3 million will be eligible for subsidies, and half of those are Latinos. The president was talking about the importance of young, healthy people signing up for insurance to spread the risk so that the premium costs do not spike over time.
Well, this plan, though, continues to be unpopular, despite the fact that it's now law. A recent NBC Wall Street Journal poll showed that 49% of Americans say that they believe that it is a bad idea.
I'd say people are divided.
Divided?
I'd say the country has been pretty much divided since the start. And it's roughly, there are a lot of people who support the law as well.
Well, you're the expert, so I'm going to go with you on that. The law signature benefit, though, is that there's a guarantee that all Americans can get insurance, even if they're ill. Building this kind of system to deliver on that promise is very complicated. Will we be ready by October 1st when enrollment begins?
So over the summer, we're going to see a big push. I think in a few weeks' time, we'll look back at the president's speech today as being the first point at which the public education campaign, the big push, began to inform people about the law and how to sign up for the law and so forth. I would say that across the state, people are driving toward October 1st, and there's generally a sense that the clock is ticking, and they're working very hard to put everything in place so that people can sign up.
And I want to point out that you and your team have put together something called Obamacare Explained, a guide to this. What can we expect to see?
So several of us here at KQED thought that there was no central place that people could go to get information about the Affordable Care Act, that anyone could go to get information within California. So we put together this guide, and you can navigate it according to who you are. You can walk through the guide.
And we just saw it?
And we just saw it there, that's true. And we called it Obamacare Explained. Yes, we know that the name of the law is the Affordable Care Act. We went with Obamacare. The president himself refers to Obamacare. We went with Obamacare so people could find it.
Got it. All right. And you can find that on kqed.org. Thanks to you, and thanks for all of you for being here tonight. And finally tonight, the California coast is renowned for its beauty, but much of that may have been lost if it weren't for a group of dedicated citizens whose stories are told in the new documentary, Rebels with a Cause. We'll hear from the filmmakers Nancy Kelly and Kenji Yamamoto after this clip.
How did they do it? Between the 1950s and the 1970s, when California was the nation's fastest growing state and cities were gobbling up nearby forests and fields, ordinary people in the San Francisco Bay Area saved a vast stretch of coastline north of the Golden Gate Bridge for parks and farms. Their efforts fostered a national movement to preserve open spaces near where people live.
Nancy Kelly and Kenji Yamamoto, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Now, your film focuses on normal, everyday citizens who led the drive to preserve open space back in the 1950s. What was California like then, and what were attitudes like?
Well, it was the post-war era. California was the fastest growing state in the nation, and the prevailing attitudes were growth is good. Just develop everything, and especially land along the coast was being developed.
Because the views were so spectacular.
Right.
Developers wanted that.
And the National Park Service was watching that happen, knowing that some of these lands had been sort of, they had their eye on them for a long time and seeing them covered with development.
So how did the volunteers come into play in all this? Who were they, and what drew them to the cause?
Well, they were ordinary people, and some of them were transplants from other parts of the country, and they saw what happened in their own neighborhood. Clem Miller, a congressman who brought up the Point Reyes bill to President Kennedy, he was from Wilmington, and he saw what happened to his city, that all of the open spaces were being gobbled up by corporations, and so he really got upset. He didn't want this to happen where he was living now in Corte Madera.
And in fact, we have a clip that mentions Clem Miller and his efforts to help preserve what is now Point Reyes National Seashore. Let's take a look.
The original cost of acquiring the Point Reyes land was $14 million. That $14 million was a lot of money in the 1960s. And Clem Miller came to me and said, "We've got a big problem out of Point Reyes."
The big problem was that acquiring the ranches for the park had pushed the anticipated cost of the National Seashore from $14 million to $25 million and counting, and Congress was balking. So the Park Service developed an unusual plan. The ranches would be in the park, yet would stay in private hands as long as farming continued.
You know, we now take urban parks sort of for granted, but it was really unusual at the time in the 1950s to have parks and open space near where people lived. Why was that so important to all these volunteers?
Well, it was, I mean, the population was just booming during that time, and there were literally not enough campgrounds and parks that people could get to without having to take a week or 2 weeks vacation to go to Yosemite or Yellowstone.
They just wanted something in their own backyard that they could take their families to and enjoy a weekend or a day at.
Right, right. They did. And even the National Park Service didn't want anything to do with the idea of national parks. But, you know, this was, in the Bay Area, this was the beginning of that movement.
That's pretty astounding to think that the National Park Service itself did not want urban parks.
Well, they thought of the perfect national park as being in wilderness, like in the Rockies or in Alaska, places that were wild. And I think what was really particular about the Bay Area is that after World War II, there were many infantrymen, people from the armed forces, the Navy, who built ships here and didn't want to leave. They loved where they were living, and that certainly was a great benefit for them and their families when they discovered the open spaces, the beaches, such as that.
So that kind of led to this continual clash, if you will, between do we preserve it or do we develop it because so many people need housing. And even Marin County supervisors at that time weren't on board. They fought against preserving Point Reyes. Is that right?
They fought against preserving Point Reyes. They fought for building a city of 30,000 in the Marin Headlands. Yeah, they were totally pro-development at that time.
You also talk in the film about a proposed development in the Bolinas Lagoon and the Marin Cello development north of the Golden Gate. What would these areas look like today had these normal, everyday citizens, rebels with a cause, as you call them, not stepped in and successfully stopped the developments? Kenji?
Well, you know, the prevailing thought at the time was that having a complete community with everything in it, all your recreation, your work, your job, and your churches all in one spot. That was the idea, and the idea also that the tax base would rise by having all the community, all the people sort of concentrated in one spot. It would have been Marincello would have been a city of 20 or 30,000 people 10 minutes from San Francisco.
With a high rise on the top of every knob, on every hill, and Bolinas Lagoon was supposed to have a heliport and a big marina and motels, and it was going to be great.
And to accommodate that, they were going to build a 4-lane freeway through Marin County to Bolinas, and so that it was really going to be.
It would have been vastly different from what we have now. What do you think is the biggest lesson here? One of the best quotes, I think, comes toward the end of the film when one of your so-called rebels says, "Nobody remembers you or remembers the struggle. They just know it's there." What's the best lesson?
You know, it takes ordinary people. It takes a single voice, really, to say, this is what we want to save. It takes that kind of passion, and with one voice you get many voices, and so you don't feel like you're alone once other people share your interest. That's what it really means.
And it's a powerful lesson because it was everyday citizens who made this happen, not lawmakers, not legislators, not the Park Service.
Right.
Well, Nancy and Kenji, thanks so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure to have you on and learn more about your film.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks.
And Rebels with a Cause is currently playing in select Bay Area theaters. You can find a link to the site at kqed.org/thisweek. And that's all for us for tonight. I'm Thuy Vu. Thanks so much for watching. Good night.